In this video, we'll be setting up your D2L gradebook for reporting grades to students only, meaning that you're not going to be using the gradebook's calculation feature, but you do want to share your students' grades with them via D2L. You have lots of options for how you might set up and organize your gradebook, and your choices for these options should be based on how you want your students to view their grades and how you want those grades to be labeled and organized. So let's begin by looking at the student's view of a sample grade screen that already has some grades and columns added by the instructor. Here's an example of what students see when they look at their course grades. If the instructor is using the final adjusted grade column to manually type in the student's current or final grade, that grade will show up here at the top of the screen above the grades items list. In this case, both the points and the percentage grade have been released to students, but that's something you can customize if you only want to show points or you only want to show percentages. Also, as you will see in a moment, you do not have to use this final grades area, but if you do, you will have to use the final adjusted grade title. There's no way to customize this to say current grade or any other text. You're stuck with final adjusted grade in this area. Below the overall grade, students can then see various grade items and categories that the instructor has set up in their course, along with any scores the instructor has added for them for these grade items. Each score, or blank score in this list, represents a column in the gradebook created by the instructor. And unlike the title for this final adjusted grade area, all of the categories and items can be customized to say whatever the instructor wants down here in the grades items area. So, since we're assuming for this video that you are not using the calculation feature in D2L, the only major decisions you'll need to make before you start using your gradebook are A, what scores you want to make available to students down here in this grade items area, B, if you want those scores to be grouped into categories, like we have a Dropbox assignments category here, and these 5 assignments are part of that category, and C, if one of the scores in this grade items list will be a current or final score. If you want your final score to appear down here as one you can customize, or appear in the top of the screen in the final adjusted grades area. Now, there's not a right or wrong way to answer any of these questions or to set up your gradebook. It's just going to be whatever works best for your class and your students. Now, let's take a look at the gradebook area from the instructor point of view and talk about how to customize what your students will see so it can look just how you want it here on the student grades screen. Now we're looking at an empty course from the instructor view. You're going to enter the gradebook by selecting grades from the grades drop-down menu or from the edit course screen. By default, you may end up here on the setup wizard the very first time you enter the grades area, but we're going to bypass the wizard and go first to the enter grades screen. So you do that by clicking enter grades here at the top. Now we're currently looking at an empty gradebook. The first thing you'll want to do, if it hasn't already been checked, is click the Switch to Spreadsheet View button here, which will allow you to actually enter grades right on the screen. By default, D2L contains columns for final calculated grades and final adjusted grades. Since you're not going to be using D2L for calculations, you won't be using the final calculated grade columns at all. Unfortunately, there's not a way to delete both of these columns from the gradebook. You'll be able to get rid of one of them, but not both of them. You'll just have to ignore it. However, it's important to note that your students will not see either of these columns in their grade view unless you change the settings in D2L to do so. By default, they're not visible to students at all. You should also see here that the final adjusted grades area has boxes where you can input student scores. If you've decided to use this final adjusted grade area, it was that area at the top on the student view screen, to communicate the student's final, overall, or current score, you can type that score with students here in a points format. So if this student's current score is a 95, I'd type 95 over 100 here. Also note that there is only one student in this demo course, but you would be able to see all of your students here on the screen. Now, if you are only using this final adjusted grade area to report grades to your students, you won't have to add any columns or categories to your gradebook. However, if you want to create your own manual current grade column or any other grade columns to share with students, you'll have to switch from the Enter Grade screen to the Manage Grade screen. You do that by clicking the Manage Grade screen here, link at the top. And if you've made changes, it will ask you if you want to save them. You'll probably want to click Save. Now, there are other videos in this series that are going to go into adding columns in your course in more detail, but for this video, we'll simply add a participation grade column, but the process would be the same if you wanted to add a final grade column or a current grade column or any other column in your gradebook. To do it, you're going to select Item from the new drop-down menu right here, Item. Then you'll have to choose a grade column type. More than likely, you'll want to go with the first option, which is numeric, but if you're only using your gradebook for reporting, you may be interested in adding either the pass-fail option or the text column or one of these other columns. For this sample, I'm just going to go with the first one and go with numeric. Then I have to give my column a name. In this case, I'm just going to call it participation score. And for the demo, I'll leave most of these options as default, but I do need to make sure that the maximum points possible for this column is what I want. In this case, I'm going to switch it to 100. And if I plan to ever award more points than the maximum I put in, I'll need to click this Can Exceed box. Then I'll click Save and Close and go back to Enter Grades to see this participation score column added from the instructor point of view. To enter any grades into this column, I just need to make sure that I'm here on Spreadsheet View instead of Standard View. And then I click into the box and I type. Finally, you're going to need to double check some settings in your gradebook to make sure that they are not calculating grades and that they are reporting the grades the way you want them to the students. To do that, we're going to go to the settings link up here in the upper right-hand corner of the grades area. In other videos in this series, we'll go through this settings area in more detail, but for now we're just going to focus on a few key things. First of all, you will definitely want to uncheck the Repeat Calculated Final Grade option here since you're not using calculation in your gradebook. If you are using the adjusted grade area, you may want to have that column repeat at the start of your grades list, but that's up to you. For now, I'm just going to leave them both unchecked. Then I'm going to go up here and click on the Calculation Options tab, which is the third tab. Again, hit Save as you switch from tab to tab. Now, if you're not using the adjusted final grade, you won't have to worry much about this area, but if you are using that column to communicate your final grades to students, you will need to make sure that the adjusted final grade button is the one that's checked, and you'll probably want to check the automatically keep final grades updated box as well. Then we're going to hit Save and go to the middle tab, which is the org unit display options. This is where you can control whether or not your students see just points or points in percentage or what they actually see as far as their grade goes. If you want them to see percentage, make sure the scheme symbol box is checked. If you want them to see points, make sure the points box is checked. And then click Save, and then click Close. Then we're going to go back to the Enter Grade screen. Now, if you're using the final adjusted grade, there's one more step you're going to need to do to make sure those grades are visible to students in that area above their grades list. You'll need to select Grade All from the column heading for the final adjusted grade column. So I'm selecting Grade All. Then from this little drop-down menu at the top, I'm going to click Release All. This is the step that allows your students to see that final grade adjusted grade area at the top of their grades page. Now, if you're using a straight up column in your course and not one of the final grades columns, you don't have to go through this step. But by default, D2L hides final grades or final adjusted grades from students, and you'll have to do that manual release for all the students at once if you want to release those grades to students. Now that you've done that, we're going to go back to the Enter Grades page one more time. And I'm going to go ahead and add a score here for participation. And then let's switch back to the student view of this same gradebook so you can see what the student's perspective will look like in this particular example. Okay, here is the student view for that really basic reporting gradebook that we just set up. Because we released the final adjusted grade to students, you can see that you can see the points and the percentage grade. They can also see the one grade item that we created, which was the participation score and the points and the percentage.